I just want to welcome all of you. I'm Dori Mintzer. I'm owner of Revolutionize Retirement, and I'm delighted you're all part of our call. For those of you who are new to the call, we meet on the fourth Tuesday of each month at 12 noon Eastern Time. And now with our Zoom setup, you can sign up for these interviews anytime you want. You don't have to wait until the week before as it used to be. So I'm delighted you're here. And within a short bit of time, within probably the month or a few more weeks than that, 6 weeks, this interview will also be part of a podcast series. So more people will be able to hear all of my guests. Everybody who signed up today will get a recording link after the call. So I am delighted that you're here. And without further ado, I just want to introduce our wonderful guest who's been with me many times over these 14 years, that I've been having this interview series, Kerry Hannon. Kerry's a leading authority and a strategist on retirement, jobs, career transitions, finances, entrepreneurship, leadership, kind of the whole gambit. She's a senior columnist and an on-air expert at Yahoo Finance and an award-winning author of 14 books, including Great Jobs for Everyone 50 Plus. She lives in Washington, D.C., and I'm just so delighted that you're here, Kerry. So thank you. And today you're going to be discussing your most recent book, which is actually about Gen Xers. Which I think has a lot of relevance for this audience in terms of this next generation that's coming along, but also the implications for boomers and our role in all of this and about retirement. So, Kerry, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Well, I'm so thrilled to be here. You're one of my very favorites. And it's just exciting to be here. And I, of course, in my new book, Retirement Bites, you are one of my featured experts because you're my go-to on a lot of these questions. So about especially career transitions and working post-retirement. So I'm delighted to be here to talk about it. And, Gen X and the younger boomers particularly are facing similar challenges. But Gen X does have some obstacles that boomers did not, or millennials did not have to face.
So can you go into that? And maybe even before we start that, what led you to writing this book of focusing on the Gen Xers? And then I really wanted to learn a little about what's different, because I think you talk about it in the book, and I do want to recommend the book. I think it's all of your books, I recommend all of them, but it's a really helpful book because it's very practical, but philosophical in some ways too. So, but why this book now?
Yeah, well, Dori, what happened is I was writing a series of surveys and reports and studies came out looking at Gen X and retirement, and almost to the T, every single one of them said Gen X is woefully unprepared for retirement, and they're freaking out about all of this. And so I started writing Yahoo Finance columns about the challenges that Gen X was facing and why we were seeing these kinds of findings in these surveys. And oh my gosh, you would not have believed we were getting millions of views on every column, thousands of comments and personal notes to me asking for help, asking for resources. And I said to my editor, I said, you know what, I think we have a book here. And I quickly talked to my agent, and she looked and she goes, well, find out if anyone else has written about Gen X and retirement. And in fact, they had not. And so Jana Heron, who's my co-author on this book, she is a young Gen Xer, and she was so totally supportive and behind this idea of let's go for this and see what we can find out that we can be helpful to really help this generation get their traction. And so that was the impetus for getting this to the next stage and getting a book out on the topic, which I'm just thrilled about. But Dori, as you asked, what are some of these obstacles that this generation is facing when it comes to financial security, particularly? And so if we go back, what occurred is as Gen Xers, which is, let's define it, between age 44 or 45 in 2026 and 61. The first Gen Xer turned 60 last year. This cohort, as they entered the workforce, the 401k was just coming on the board. I mean, we were just getting these in employer-provided retirement plans. The pension, the traditional pension, was sliding away. And there was this thing called the 401k that nobody knew what to do with. There weren't many options of what to invest in. You couldn't invest very much money. And there was literally no financial education around what people should be doing it. So this do-it-yourself retirement all of a sudden stepped into the mainstream. And this generation really was the first test market for it. And in fact, many of us ended up, cashing out. Like I personally, now I'm not a Gen Xer, but I'm just on the cusp of Boomer Gen Xer. And I know when I switched jobs after 5 years, at the age of 30, I cashed out my 401k. Nobody told me not to. I didn't understand that what it would be worth today, even if I added nothing to it, the compounding of that would be significant. So it was a big mistake. Gen Xers did that. Gen Xers also, they weathered some economic downturns, 2000, the '08 recession. There were all sorts of different economic changes. This is also a generation that grew up with a lot of credit cards. I mean, credit cards really became mainstream. It was like you didn't even really have to have a job to get 4 or 5 credit cards. I mean, there were always offers coming in the mail. So this is a generation that became very comfortable with using credit cards and debt in that fashion, revolving debt. Then just I'll say one final thing, because there's several other things we could get into, but it is this group at this age range is now very squeezed between having aging parents that they need to deal with financial help with in many ways and managing that, and children like college educations and still raising kids. Jana, for example, her son, she's, as I said, Gen Xer, her son is 16, so she has college education ahead, but yet she has aging parents. And so, I think there's a lot of factors that kind of stumped and challenged this generation. But I will wrap it up on this section by saying quickly, I believe in Gen Xers, because this is a generation that, drank from the hose, rode the bikes without helmets. They raged against the machine. This is the latchkey kids are totally cool, got it done by themselves, and they will again. It's just that we need to figure out how we do that. Somebody give me a roadmap.
So what kind of suggestions do you have for them? I mean, how is retirement different from them than it was for us, the boomers? Because I'm one of the kind of leading edge boomers. And, and I think there was all this hype back then about no roadmaps, no whatever. Now we've been at it for a while. But as you say, and I've read your book and we've talked more, not only the 401ks, but Gen Xers haven't had they go from job to job. There's not the same kind of, job. Well, not that, I mean, the whole job market has changed. How is that impacting thinking about this next stage?
The concept, true. And I think we can't be too generalized about that, because some Gen Xers certainly did ride, get into one, but it wasn't the same ethos where boomers often would stay with an employer throughout their career. There is definitely a lot more career transition, career changing. So that impacts your retirement savings in many ways, for, whether you are delayed getting into a new retirement plan when you move money around. So that's a big issue. I also think for Gen X story that there is, and we're talking about it with boomers, but there is the longevity question. And so the whole concept of stepping out of the workplace in even your mid 60s, you've got roughly 3 decades to finance in retirement, if in fact that's what you choose to do. So it is pretty daunting. The other piece of it, which boomers are also facing, but Gen X has the time to really prepare, is healthcare costs are through the roof. And the out-of-pocket expenses, even once you're 65 and on Medicare, are extraordinary for people. And it's going to be the single biggest expense in retirement for most people. And so in order for Gen X to really be able to have that financial security, not knowing what that picture is going to look like now, I think the number Fidelity even throws out today is someone who retired at 65 would have maybe $175,000 in out-of-pocket expenses throughout the rest of their life. Now, lots of caveats there, your health, the longevity in your family, all those kinds of things. But it is worth noting that most people don't pay attention to that. They don't understand it. So Gen X, I think, yes, you have and again, I must note that only 50% of the US population has access to something like a 401k. An employer provided plan is not a given. And many Gen Xers have been having to save for their retirement on their own in an individual retirement account, an IRA. And even person to person I talk to, if your employer's not automatically putting money aside for you, it's really hard to start. It's really hard to do that automated, set it aside for yourself. So I think Gen Xers are coming up on this and saying, oh my gosh, and again, Dori, part of that not having an employer provided plan is Gen Xers, a lot of them are running their own shops, or they're working for small businesses that don't offer these retirement plans. They may not have one in their own small business they've started because it's a very independent person who is in this cohort, but often haven't looked at it. And maybe you were better at this, and even I was. When you're getting into the workplace, retirement seems just so far down the highway that the idea of even setting money aside is not top of mind. Whereas today, with millennials and younger generations, we now have this auto enrollment that many employers, and by law, certain sized employers, the larger ones, have to automatically enroll people in a retirement plan and auto escalate each year to bump that percentage up. These are things that are going to do amazing things for the younger generations, because they will start saving for retirement in their 20s. And that compounding is so much greater than if you start in your 40s, because even if you don't put any more aside in your 40s, starting at 20 gives you a big leg up to having financial security.
That's really true. I mean, I have to say, even in my father, way back when I was in my 20s, I guess that was maybe when there was the beginning of I don't think it was called a 401, whatever it was back then, a Kia. I don't remember what it was. But I remember him saying, even if you have to borrow money, put money in for retirement. And I started doing that then. That was some good advice that he did. A lot of other things weren't such good advice, but that was good advice. And it made a difference. But yeah. So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to add to it, because I love to sort of set the stage on these Gen Xers, is the big issues, the other daunting things facing Gen Xers is they have more credit card debt, as I alluded to at the beginning, more credit card debt than any generation, and they have more student loan debt than any generation. These two factors really present some real difficult choices, and when it comes to how you allocate your money in terms of savings, and it also presents some pretty daunting realistic outcomes in retirement if you can't take control of these. So I often tell people this, one of the first things they need to grapple with is, how do we pare down some of this credit card debt, that high interest credit card debt in particular, because debt is a dream killer. And if there's a way that you can take control, there's lots of methods to paying down credit card debt or debt in general, but certainly, there's the avalanche and the snowball, and everyone's got a theory about what's the best way to pay down this debt. But it's really, the time is now to face it while you do have maneuver room, to get that cleaned up so that you do have the ability to have the financial security in retirement that you're going to need.
Can you expand more on that? Because I think part of the beauty of your book is you really have some very practical things that Gen Xers can do. And I think, boomers can help. And, those of us who have people in that, generation of many boomers do have, kids, I guess, in that generation too. What are ways to start thinking now? Because I could imagine that even the concept of retirement can be just so daunting. Like, I can't possibly even conceive of that when I have all these expenses now. So what are some of the, in addition to paying down debt, what are
Sure.
other things people should start thinking about and doing?
Well, what I love is my number one tip is pay attention to your health. All right. We talked a few minutes ago about how medical care and out-of-pocket healthcare costs are going to be one of your biggest chunks of your household income in retirement. So the thing is, if you can start in your in your 40s and your early 50s, really paying attention to your health and getting fit in whatever way you can, whether you have Jana, my co-author, she discovered she had high blood pressure, and she's like, what? How can that be? I'm only 44 years old. But because she did that health checkup, she realized she has this issue. She's able to attend to it right now. So hopefully the repercussions in later years will be, staved off because she's paying attention. So anything you can do to, eat with an eye to nutrition, to stay physically fit, to get those annual checkups. It sounds like, whoa, what are you talking about? What does this have to do with my financial security? It really has a lot to do with it. So that's something that is within your control to take control of now so that it doesn't mushroom to something far worse as you age. The second thing that's really pretty basic, but do a budget, right? Most people, you think, oh my gosh, of course, a budget. You roll your eyes, you go like, seriously, I know what comes in and comes out, but do you really? As people get older, and for the Gen Xers, Gen Xers are at their peak earnings years right now. And so this is a positive thing. This is a time where they really can, take advantage of the catch-up contributions of their 50 and older for some of their retirement accounts. They have the ability to save more now, but they also, have what I call lifestyle creep. So at this stage in your life, you're probably, you're making more money. Maybe you're taking an extra vacation. You're going out to dinner a little bit more. It all becomes easier to let the money go out. And you might not even, I'm not talking about too many streaming services, because all of us might have that, but it's really, let's pay it. Let's drill down. What is coming in? What is going out? What do I value right now? Do I still really value spending money on X? And it gives you a chance to do that inner soul searching about what your priorities are, how you're spending your money, how you can get lean and mean now that will give you that traction and that solid footing to move forward to those next decades in your life with a bit more control. And I think when I look at many of these surveys that have come out, and in particular, one in particular I love is Transamerica Institute, Catherine Collinson's report that showed that they asked boomers, how much do you need to have saved for retirement? I mean, Gen Xers. And they're like, I need $1.2 million. And so then you say, well, okay, how did you come about that number, 1.2 million? They go, oh, well, I guessed. Well, you can't be throwing darts if you're trying to actually make a plan for something. It doesn't mean the world's going to operate just as you have put down on your budget and on your retirement planning page, but it sure helps to have a good grip and a good vision of what it might look like. And if you're guessing, this is not good. And so it's very easy to do today. And it's as simple as running a retirement calculator. And most of the financial services websites have those that you can jump on. Fidelity, Vanguard, T. Rowe, run one of these. I think the Employee Benefits Research Institute still has a good one on their site. AARP, I think, has one. Run your numbers. If you can just do something as rudimentary as that gets you thinking, it gets the wheels going about what this might look like. And that $1.2 million, it doesn't, maybe you don't need that much. Or if you do, let's, jumpstart that a bit. The other thing, and I really advise, if you can have access to sitting down with a financial advisor, and I like a certified financial financial planner that is, as they have the fiduciary pledge, and your interests are all they think about in recommending investments, because this is not all about investments, though. Working with a financial advisor can help you see that holistic look at what this next stage of life might look like. What would your ideal day be like? What would you regret if you didn't get to do it? Once you get someone who's unbiased up on that balcony, looking down at your life and say, okay, let's look at this. And what do you value? What are your priorities? And what might you want to be sure you get to in that next phase of life? Once you start visualizing these things, it enables you to get a plan and to start saving and get serious about it.
I always love your approach, and I totally agree about the holistic financial planners, because it isn't just the money. I mean, it really is the lifestyle, as you say, that you want. And it's so important to think about, what those ideas are. But how do people find, oftentimes I hear people say, and I always say, no matter how much or how little you have, talk with a financial planner. But there are some that have minimums of, how much income you're supposed to have. Do you have suggestions on ways, to find a good financial planner if, you don't have a large income, but really want to kind of protect what you have and start planning realistically now, kind of start where you are?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is to just begin by asking friends and family who they talk to, who they trust, who they work with. So within your own network, you might be able to find access. And if it's someone who works with a relative or a friend or something, they may be open to bringing you in on a one-on-one consultation and see where it goes. There are many planners that will just do a one-time run-through for a flat fee. You don't have to have a percentage of your assets, invested with them or anything like that. So there's lots of different ways that financial advisors and planners get paid. And so the point is to ask for some names. You want to interview a couple of them, 2 or 3, to see who you're simpatico with, and find out how they get paid, how they make money, and if there's a way that you can just get your foot in the door and start with a basic plan. Just once a year. You're not asking them to invest your money for you or whatever it is, but to just give you an overview. So that's one way. And there are many sort of AI operated services now, that robo advisors that through Betterment and some of these other sites that really, can give you a sample, give you an idea, at least get you started. I personally like working with a real human being, but that doesn't mean that's the only way to go about it. And if you're just wanting to dip your toe in, why not give it a whirl and see what you find out? It's important, Dori, also to remember that with Gen Xers, I was saying all these negative things. One thing I did say is they're the peak earnings years, but the number 2 thing is Gen Xers have a very high level of home equity. And so that's in the plus column. They do have, so when people say, how much do you have, quote, save for retirement? Okay, let's look at that retirement savings, but there's lots of other buckets that make up your total wealth package. So it could be your home, you might own, a rental property somewhere. There's lots of different things that go in. You may even, for Gen Xers in particular, have a wealth transfer that may come from your older boomer parents, right? There may be, if you're a younger Gen Xer, there could be an inheritance possibility. So these are things that when we get focused on just that number in someone's 401k, that's just a piece of the puzzle. That's not the whole story. And another piece, Dori, that I think you may be able to chime in more on this, because I actually talk to you about this subject a lot. I tell individuals especially Gen Xers, cool, if you think you're going to retire, most people say they're going to retire at whatever, let's just throw out 65, but they technically do retire at 62 or 61 because of a health reason, or they have to care for caregiving duties or what have you, or a layoff, and it's hard to get back in with ageism. But whatever anyone can do to help future financial security, if you can stay on the job just a bit longer than you actually, in your dream world, you could step off. But if you could really plan to stay on a bit longer, you're going to really thank yourself in the future. And one way to do that is you have to keep your skills up. You can't just sit there and expect that your employer is going to say, wonderful, just keep hanging around. You have to constantly be enhancing your skills, adding new things, up to date on your industry. And that's the only way you're going to be able to stay in the job market and stay in your job a bit longer. But the other piece, Dori, and I will turn it back to you briefly on this, is the idea of working in retirement. And I know one, and plan on, so it doesn't have to be pedal to the metal. It can be just, maybe it's just starting a micro business, or just working a few hours, or a few days, I should say, in a month or in a week, whatever it might be. But Dori, one thing you often say when you speak to your clients is you'll say, well, how important for this second act, or this second career or job you want to do in your quote retirement years, how big a piece does money have to play in that equation? And I think that's pretty key. And I'm going to throw it back to you to chat about that for 1 second, because someone has to think about, if they're going to keep working for financial security, what does that look like?
And there's so many more options now than there were. But I see many, many people of different ages that are talking about that. And I think your books, coming back to you too in that, keeping up your skills, looking at what your strengths are, really trying to also think about, given, kind of the lifestyle options you want, what money do you still would be good to still bring in for how many years, with the hope that you're going to live a long time longer, and how much more do you need to earn? And it may be the becoming an entrepreneur. It may be the remote work. I mean, you've got different books that, talk about all of those things, encore careers, different ways to bring in money, but really trying to think about, what do I need so that hopefully I don't outlive my money if, I am lucky and have a good long life. And there are many ways to do it. There are ways to have phased retirements. Some industries are better than that than others. Part-time work, as I just said before, the remote work, really trying to think about it. The part that's so hard, I think, and I'd like to put it back on you now, is there's so many people who are getting laid off. And there's mergers and acquisitions. And then now we're seeing, a lot of people who maybe worked in the federal government who, are suddenly unemployed and, wondering, how am I going to keep earning money? Because I need to earn money. And so it's not always by choice. And I wonder if you could speak a little too, when it's, kind of the situations when you see it's forced on somebody, even earlier than expected. And how do you, kind of think about helping somebody be optimistically realistic of, wanting to continue to earn income, because hopefully there's going to be a long life, and there may be the responsibilities of, as you say, children and parents to need to take care of.
Yeah, I just, you can't sugarcoat this bit about ageism. I mean, I want to say, oh, the world has changed. And it's just, if you step out of a job, if you get laid off in your late 50s, oh, have no fear. Someone's going to recognize how great you are. It's really, employers are just as reluctant to hire older workers, I think, as they've always been. But there are ways to get in the door. And the most important one we're talking about is this idea of your skills have got to be sharp. You have to be up to date on your industry. You can't be complacent at any step of this way. You have to really be able to show that you can step into a job and do it today. I mean, I think I got, and I'll, throw out my age, I got hired at Yahoo Finance at age 61 in a full-time position. I think, and I truly believe I was hired because I could do the job today. I mean, I could step immediately into that job. There was no on-ramping. They knew I could do the job. And that's the value of being an experienced worker, is you bring it, and you make their jobs easier for them because you can do that. I'm a big believer in using your network. You've heard me say this many times. Networking is one letter away from not working. And so what that means is it's not, networking in this sort of, way that is not engaging for all of us. Networking is super fun, and it's reaching out to everyone you know in all walks of your life, your kids' friends. You can, your friends, their kids. Your industry friends. You're all across the board to say, hey, I'm looking for something. And, if you hear of anything, you just have to get it out there. And on LinkedIn, which is my favorite platform, there are many ways to figure out, to stay connected, to show your expertise by highlighting articles you've read that you think would be interesting, commenting on other people's posts in your industry to indicate that you're engaged and you're up to date on things. And that's a very valuable way to find contacts. So networking is more important than ever. Staying up to date with your skills, more important than ever. Being willing to shift gears, to try different ways of doing things. I've always called it redeploying your skills. So don't get stuck that you need to stay in your industry or even look in that lane. Look at your skill set and where that might go. But I also think for older workers, what do you want to do? Okay, the job market is not pretty, but what in your dream, where would you want to work? What company or nonprofit has a mission that really resonates with you? This is your time to take control of that. So then let's go look and see. Don't look at every job board in the world. Very few people find jobs through job boards, but you get ideas of who is hiring, like Idealist or LinkedIn. I love their, announcements of job opportunities when you fill out, like, I want to, these are the kinds of things I'm interested in, whether it's remote work or, all those kinds of, right down to those details. And I think there's ways to use that to look back at your LinkedIn people and say, okay, well, who do I know that works there or knows somebody who works there? And that gets you in the back door again. If somebody, they can't get the job for you, but if they could get you in the door, that somebody flags your resume, hallelujah, that is the best you can ask for. So those are simple things. You've all heard these over and over again, but they don't go away. They're basic job hunting skills that you're at an age where you have an amazing network and you have the ability to reach out and ask for help. But many of us don't want to ask for help because, and also, my goodness, Dori, when you lose a job, you talk to clients like this, it's demoralizing. It's a crushing blow to your ego, to your sense of, whoa, like, what was didn't do anything wrong. Why was I eliminated? Why other people were? It wasn't personal, but yet you take it personally. So it takes a lot of sort of psychological revamping too.
Absolutely. I'd like you to expand on that if you would too, because, all these things are so important, but fear, kind of lack of self-confidence, procrastination, all these psychological factors could get in the way. So what are ways to kind of kick yourself in the butt, in a sense, or support, kick somebody else in the butt a little to, help people take that step and, and maybe take a course or refresh the skill. I mean, what have you learned in your work that helps people overcome some of the internal barriers?
That's right. I mean, you absolutely have to have mojo. I sort of find that at an older age, and this, is true for the Gen Xers and boomers. I mean, I have a lot more confidence when I go into almost any interaction because I don't care in the same way that I did when I was younger. Like, I'm very I know who I am and I know what my skills are, and I'm much clearer thinking than I was when I was younger. And I think that most of us really are in that same position. So you need to own that and believe in yourself that way. But important things you just mentioned. Don't sit around and just, if you're working with anyone who is dealing with this, is you've got to encourage them to not just send off resumes, but to actually get out and volunteer, get out into the world. You never know who, out of your mind and into the world is one way to look at it. And you're out there, you're meeting people, you're doing some good work. Hopefully it's skill-based work, and you never know when you might. So I think that it's important to volunteering is one way to kind of keep your juices going and also feel good about yourself. Adding a skill, absolutely. Be intentional about that. Look at if there's a certain kind of job you'd like to maybe move into. Take a look at like what are somebody who is in that position. Look at their LinkedIn profile and see what some of the certifications they might have. Certifications are not all blanket great things. I mean, you want to make sure you've picked something that actually is going to have value for you. But even if you don't do any of that, someone's going to ask you, what have you been doing? Older workers have longer times out of the workplace. So you're going to get that question. So you need to be saying, yeah, I've been volunteering. I've been taking this class, or, whatever it is you've done, you've got to show that you've been engaged in the world in some way. But I will say, finally, even if you don't take a class that actually connects to work you want to do, say you take a class in glass blowing, it is great for you. I mean, any kind of learning, just you're a beginner and then you become proficient in some way at it. I'm not saying you'll be a great glass blower, but you do have that resilience of having, beginning to end. And I just think it's a fantastic, and when you learn new things, everything in your brain goes, you look at the world differently. So I'm a huge believer in obviously learning on any capacity, but so that is just one thing. And again, it's connecting with your network. It's being really winnowed down where you want to work. It's not a scattershot approach. You want to really do that soul searching about what it is you'd like to do, who's doing it that you can talk to, having that informational interviews about what those jobs are like. If you can apprentice and volunteer in that arena, even better, because you get like, for example, I'll say this quickly, Jana, who I wrote this book with, Jana Hannon, young Gen Xer, as I've said a few times, she was actually laid off from Yahoo Finance after we did the book. So earlier, a year ago. And I kept telling her, this is the best thing that ever happened to you. You're not even going to believe it, but it really is. So Jana, it's been great, right? She's super talented. So she shifted over to doing a project-based work with the Wall Street Journal in their podcast area, which is something she had never done before, but she certainly had the skill set to redeploy in this direction. And so it ramps up her learning curve in this new arena. She gets excited about work again because she's learning new things on the job. And it's also given her a chance to say, because it's a contract position, is this something I really want to do or not? And she's in that position to reevaluate whether she wants to step into a full-time position or, continue doing that. I always call it a patchwork quilt of jobs, which I think personally is a lot of fun to do, but maybe not as much job security.
But it's a beautiful example of overcoming that demoralization of being laid off, and losing her job, and then kind of creatively doing things. And I so agree with you that, whatever the course, whether it be glass blowing, art, whatever, just becoming a learner again. I know both of us share this whole lifelong learning, idea, but it really is so important, I think. I want to kind of turn a little, shifting back and forth, but because I do want to encourage the listeners. So we have two kind of questions or comments in chat that I want to bring in. The first one is, retirement's being challenged now by economic instability due to tariffs, rising prices, the AI bubble affecting jobs for so many. Can you speak a little to that and how that's affecting the Gen Xers as well as others? I mean, I guess we can look at all of the different generations. Your sense of kind of what are ways that people can focus and understand that reality, but also not be frightened to move on, I guess, or take chances.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I'm not convinced that AI is this huge demon to jobs that a lot of people are throwing out there at this moment. I think that it's definitely something that in some industries could be replacing the workforce, but in many industries, AI is enhancing. I mean, I find AI enhances my work in a way that I never expected. So I have a lot of fun playing around with it and how it is super time saving for me. And for everything from, as simply doing transcription services, which has been coming online for a while, to, asking ChatGPT to help me write headlines. I think this is great. I don't have to sit and like beat my brain up trying to be creative, I can get some ideas, and then I may tweak that, but at least it gets me started. So I think that, yes, there are major issues with the cost of living. I mean, it is just, I just did a piece for Yahoo Finance last week about the huge chunk of people's, and we talked about this earlier, their medical costs that are eating up huge portions of their Social Security checks, and how Social Security's, I love that it has the cost of living, the COLA adjustment every year, but it doesn't always match what the actual costs that retirees are spending their money on, which is, healthcare and housing and often electricity and things like that. It doesn't encompass that when they look at those costs. So many retirees I'm talking to are struggling with the rising medical costs, taking a huge chunk of their checks, as well as basic cost of living. It's really, there's no easy answer. All I can say is if you have time and you have runway, which is why for Gen X, it's incredibly important to do that budget. How do you get lean and mean? Be cognizant that that this is not an easy skate. I mean, you've got to have several buckets to give you that financial security moving forward. It needs to be retirement savings, savings outside of retirement. Could it be a home equity? There's, do you want to work? You have to be mapping. If you want, we often, and Dori, you and I have talked about this, no matter what the financial and economic realities of today are, which are quite harsh. And again, we haven't even started with the Social Security discussion, where I had all these, they call them I can't even say it, influencers who were telling everyone, take your Social Security at 62 and invest it. If you don't need it, just invest it. Well, isn't that a brilliant concept? I mean, oh my goodness. I went nuts over that, but that is an idea, right? But I tell people wait till age 70 so you get the biggest bang for your biggest checks. And my Social Security will show you exactly, if you start the earliest you can take Social Security at 62, the size of your check, what it is at your full retirement age, which for Gen Xers is 67. And if you wait till age 70, when the increase, the bump up between your full retirement and 70. So that's the biggest check. Can you wait till age 70? Is there a way you can make a plan that you can stay in the workplace till age 70 and get that opportunity? But again, this starts with, and Dori, you and I talk about this, you got to start 5 years ahead of time, making that plan, like what skills should you be thinking about? How should you be taking control of your finances? How should you be testing things out so that when you get to that age where you're either laid off unexpectedly, you have a health crisis, whatever it might be, you have some line of preparation. I know that's a little bit like, it's hard to, when you're in it, to kind of make sense of all that. But if you have any window to prepare, this is the time to be doing that.
Well, I 100% agree. And I know we talked a lot about that. You also talk about the decumulation. Maybe you could speak about that. That's when I guess we have to turn the savings into income, or we have to think about what is life when there isn't going to be income coming in, or you explain it. I don't even.
I mean, that's, you've turned off that paycheck, and now you're relying on, your savings and retirement accounts and outside retirement accounts and perhaps Social Security. This is going to be your monthly income. And I would say most, or let's say many retirees freak out because we've been conditioned for our lifetimes practically that you have this constant refilling of the bucket with this paycheck. And now the bucket is as is. And there's this huge fear of, what you mean that, if I take money out of this, I'm going to have less money in my retirement accounts. That's like, everyone's like, it's all about, save, not spend. And people get totally paralyzed about spending the money that, and let's say in a great scenario, you actually have saved adequately. But you're denying yourself because you're afraid that you're going to live long and you're going to run out of money. And there's so many, it's the fear of the uncertainty, but getting a grip on how that spending might look. There's all kinds of ways that financial advisors run those, figure on withdrawing 4% each year and, so on. But it really comes down to lifestyle questions, what you see as what your expenditures might be, but giving yourself permission to dip into those accounts is the biggest one. It's a psychological decision. It's super difficult to do. A lot of people, there's a lot of movement now to having annuities, a kind of investment in your retirement account, so that it automatically is going to be paying out a payment to you each month without you having to actually hit the button to get the withdrawal made, or have somebody have it automated for you. Any way you can automate that spending from these accounts in retirement, it's going to make it easier. But like, for example, my husband is a bit older than me, and he decided he was going to retire about a year and a half ago. And he said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, you've worked really hard your whole life. You've saved adequately. I see no reason why you shouldn't, but just figure out how you're going to pay yourself." Because that's the question, because I'm making my money's over here. This is my paycheck, but what's your paycheck going to look like? And he did that. He sat down with a financial advisor who helped him figure out which accounts, how to make it make sense so that he doesn't, freak out about this. Plus he was 70, so we tapped into Social Security. So he's got that. At that point, he got the biggest check he possibly could.
Is to be able to do, but I think the fear sometimes gets in people's way, and the ageism. There's another question here, a comment first about when I started with my old employer in 1989. I heard a lot about the three-legged stool pension, which no longer exists, 401k, Social Security as a way to plan for retirement. But with ageism, and I would add internalized ageism, because I think that's a big thing too. What are some of the part-time jobs, roles? What are things you would recommend that people could think about at this stage of life that would be available?
Yeah, I think it's super important to keep this in mind, because we've been saying this for a while. Work is that fourth leg, right? And in some fashion, because even people who have saved adequately that I know want to have some income in this retirement, in the early stages of retirement particularly, but as a safety net, just to have that ability to know that you can do that. And again, I think remote work, even though, people are saying, well, there's more back to the office thing. I think remote work, the genie came out of the bottle, particularly during the pandemic. It did not go away. These are great opportunities for older workers to find these, and contract jobs also were one of the big trends that came out of the pandemic, as employers increasingly turned to not having a full-time in-house workforce, but using contract workers. So you have these two very positive trends, I think, for older workers that help fight back on ageism, that open up the door to job opportunities, not in your hometown, but globally, the opportunities to use your established skills to do a variety of things, whether you're an accountant and your background is in accounting, and you can, helicopter in and do bookkeeping for a small business, even if it's once a month or, periodically. There's opportunities. There's a group in the Washington, D.C. area and in Boston, the Flex Professionals, and they have a lot of these kind of, you go through a pretty rigorous vetting process, but they have a lot of opportunities for experienced workers to do remote work, part-time contract positions. And I think this is the kind of thing that to work for. There's there's the other one, I'm spacing on the name of it, but many of you on this call might know it. And it's about vintage workers, seniors. It's all about mostly the insurance industry and other things, but she was one of the first ones out there with this. And I'll share it with Dori in the notes or something when my mind comes back to me on it. But it's one of the first to open for older workers these opportunities to redeploy skills from their previous businesses into more of these remote contract positions. So it's staying open for that. Certain industries, obviously, like I'm a writer, selling words can go a lot of different directions. So if you have communication skills, writing skills, there's lots of pathways to look for. And I think employers are more willing to take a risk on you if it's a contract or a part-time position, because that, they can step away when they need to, and okay, fine, but at least you get there and you might establish yourself and stay in the game there. Looking to your former employer for opportunities, boomeranging back for part-time contract things. Why not? Don't be too shy about asking, even if it's in another department, if there's a way, because they know who you are, and that's an opportunity. So those anything that you can sort of translate, that you can do computer-based white collar jobs are more opportunities, but you're pretty limited by your own imagination in many ways. Like if there's a hobby you love, maybe look around and see what in there might offer some opportunities for you. And so I do think there are things. Dori, I was going to tell one quick story about an individual. Now he was in his 50s, and I highlight him in my book. And he was in his 50s, and he stepped out of he was laid off in sales, and he couldn't get another position. And he blamed it to, he sent lots of resumes and he had interviews, but he put it down to ageism, because it's a young person's game, the sales business. But he's a fabulous sailor. So he was in Longboat Key. He decided, I'm sick of sending resumes. I'm going to go down to Longboat Key in Florida. I'm going to see if I can get a job teaching sailing for the winter. And he did. And while he was out sailing, he would tell everyone his story. And he told one of the guys he was out teaching to sail, who happened to be a CEO of a company in New Jersey, that, he was looking for work in sales, but he hadn't had any luck. So this is what he was doing. So, over several days. And then the guy said, you know what, I was thinking, we have a position open at my company in New Jersey as a project manager. I think you should apply for it. And he's like, I'm not a project manager. I've never taken one of the certification programs for that. And he said, trust me, you just showed me as a sailor how you can get from point A to point B to this and navigate this weather circumstance. I think you're a project manager. Now, okay, he interviewed, he got the job, he's promoted a couple times now, and now he's in his early 60s, how old is he now? He's still late 50s. And he said that, he said the thing is, yes, he had a direct contact with the CEO, but he had to get the job on his own. So you never know where you're going to find somebody who might recognize that your skill you have in your hobby might actually be something that translates to the workplace.
A beautiful example, but it also ties into, I'm just reminded with this question about the three-legged stool, in terms of work, but the three-legged stool in terms of well-being is connection, engagement, and purpose and meaning. And I know you talk about that also in your book. And I think it's for Gen X's, boomers, Gen Zers, millennials, whatever. That whole idea of being connected in some way, having a sense of agency, having a sense of connecting, whether it be remotely, I guess, or in person, is so important in addition to the finances. So I just wanted to comment on that too. But I have another question. Oh, no, go ahead first to respond to that.
I think most of us, unless you're a real introvert, get high off of those human connections. We get inspired, we get engaged, we get like, I don't know, I get jazzed up over it. And it's like, there's something about it that just gets you thinking more creatively. And also just that when we were talking about job searching, one thing I forgot to mention, and Dori, you talk about this too, is, do you know other people in the same boat? This is something you can recommend to people who are out of work. Can you all get together for coffee, even if it's just a couple of you, or if it has to be on the computer, fine, a Zoom call, but if it can be in person, even better these days. And you kind of support each other and you say, hey, I heard about this, or I heard about that, or you might be good for this. You never know, but it gives you, because your family and friends get really sick of hearing about it.
And you do need the support from other people. And that's part of the psychological thing too, of not going down that rabbit hole of, oh, there's nothing here for me, or I can't do anything. But I have another question I want to ask before I just have you leave us with another takeaway is, we're looking now at, the boomers who are all, the older boomers are turning 80, and, we have the Gen Xers, as you say, are 40 to 61 now. If looking ahead to 10 years, if you were to kind of think ahead, what changes do you think we're going to see that Gen Xers are going to bring us in terms of retirement or kind of ways of thinking about this next stage of life?
Well, I definitely think more so than boomers, Gen Xers are going to be working longer. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It doesn't mean that it's going to be grind. They're going to be they're going to be shifting. They're going to be doing this for a while. They're going to be doing that for a while longer. I think work is going to be a bigger piece of their next chapter. And I think these examples, and I think boomers did start this pathway, but Gen Xers, I think, are going to embrace this idea of having multiple jobs in this stage of life and multiple structures of those jobs, whether they're, part-time, whether they're, for a season, all those kinds of things. Boomers started that, but it's going to be a reality for Gen Xers with longevity. And I think the younger generations, I'm already seeing this, and you did allude to this, Dori, at the beginning. There's much more job jumping, much more shifting of careers early on. So this, the generation, millennials coming up, but Gen Xers are much more adept at shifting gears, moving in a different direction than boomers were. And I think that message, that's going to be the fabric of the job market moving forward. Nothing's forever. We always have known that, but it's more true than ever that there's really is no thing called job security. So you are and you hate to say it's up to you, but you're only limited by your own imagination and your ability to figure out ways that you can be relevant and make a difference in those areas. And one other thing I loved, I didn't mention earlier, but everyone on this call probably gets it, is I'm a big believer in vision boards. So if you're stumped about saving, it's really hard to save because you have all these life costs right now. The cost of living is up, or you don't know what kind of job or what your retirement might even look like. We talked about what the ideal day was. I personally, to get psyched up about saving, I keep a vision board. I put like sayings I like, or, you got to dream to get there. I put up pictures of the Virginia countryside or St. Bart's or whatever it is that I'm saving money for that I can get psyched about. And so everyone's got their own thing, and you change these all the time. It's a work in progress, but it's one of those basic things that a lot of coaches tell you to do. And you know what? It really works because it gets the wheels moving. It gets you thinking about, what am I? Money is not the end all of everything. Money, most people on their deathbed don't say, oh my gosh, I wish I had more money, or I wish I worked harder. They don't. But money is the means to an end. It's what gets you to do those fabulous life experience that you want to be able to do. So being able to visualize that in a tangible way, I think is so positive for all of us. Like, do I really want to keep working? I guess I would if I want to be able to do X, but let me see what kind of work would inspire me. And then you cut out different jobs that interest you or you kind of are fascinated by.
Beautiful example. And it really speaks to what you said earlier, that it's only our imagination that holds us back. So if you can let yourself, and I totally agree, a vision board's a beautiful way of doing it. Any other kind of last sort of thoughts you'd like to leave the listeners with of just, ways to kind of embrace or think about now, as well as, kind of where you want to be going forward, whether you're a Gen Xer or a boomer or a Gen Zer or a millennial or whatever your age?
I think it's, we all have to be very careful of what I call the Scarlett O'Hara syndrome. I'll think about it tomorrow, because you're not going to think about it tomorrow. You need to think about it today. And it's no longer this huge runway ahead. There's great stuff ahead. And one thing that we didn't talk about in this discussion, which we all know, the importance of working with younger generations, and whatever it is, whether it's through work or through volunteering or whatever it is, the energy. And I personally discovered this working with Jana, because when Jana at Yahoo Finance, I'll tell you what, Jana is the one who hired me at Yahoo Finance, and she is 20 years younger than me, so 2 decades younger than me. She hired me. She was my editor. She totally changed the whole way. Like, I was pretty burned out and jaded about my work. Trust me, I've been doing this a long, long time. And she just totally got me excited to see it from a different angle, a different viewpoint. She said, Kerry, you got to write about Social Security. I'm like, oh no, somebody else does that. No, you got to do it. So I had to start learning about the ins and outs of Medicare, Social Security, which I used to glaze over about. But just that learning curve in my job just got me excited about writing again, about making a difference through my financial columns to tell people how to navigate this stuff. All of you can do that in your jobs too, but it often comes from working with somebody younger who gives you that fresh set of eyes to go like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And yeah, I should learn more about that.
No, I think that's such an important point, and I think it's tied into the not letting ageism or internalized ageism get in the way. We need younger and older people, the role models that are older than us, the role models that are younger, and to think of ourselves as role models, I think, too. But we need all the different generations to be able to do that. So I'm glad you raise that. Well, thank you. I always love having you here, and I could go on and on and on, but because there's so many things we didn't touch on, but thank you for being here and the things that we did focus on. And I totally recommend Kerry's book right here. Whoops, you can't see it because I have a blurry background here, but it's called Retirement Bites, a Gen X Guide to Securing Your Financial Future by Kerry and Jana Herron. So thanks again for taking the time. So one other thing you wanted to say?
A quick explainer on the title, Retirement Bites. It's not saying that retirement is lousy. What it's saying, it's a play off of Reality Bites, the movie, which was for Gen X as they were approaching adulthood. It was this anxiety they had about becoming grown up. So that movie became kind of like a cult movie for Gen X. And so Retirement Bites is really a flashback to that, saying this anxiety about retirement, chill out, you got this.
I should have asked you that at the beginning, but I'm glad we ended with that. So, well, thank you so much, and take care and be well. And with this weather, stay safe. So take care. Thanks again for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here too. Bye-bye. Take care.